This week, we talk to NASA consultant and Apollo historian Ben Feist as we discuss his involvement with the new Apollo 11 quarantine movie.
And of course, we keep you up to date with all the latest news and sport from the world of spaceflight.
If you're new here, you may not be aware of our social media channels. You can follow us at Space and Things 1 on Twitter, or get involved at Space and Things Podcast on Facebook and Instagram.
And as always, we are extremely grateful for your support. But whether you're a silent supporter or someone who's been sharing our stuff with all of your friends, we hope that you enjoy episode 22 of the Space and Things Podcast.
You're listening to the Space and Things Podcast with Emily Carney and Dave Giles.
I'm Emily Carney.
And I'm Dave Giles, and welcome to episode 22 of our podcast. It's been a pretty crazy week at HQ for Space and Things. We've got a lot of exciting things coming up, a lot of plans being made, and the diary's looking nice. So if you're on our Patreon, I'm going to start divulging some of the things that are coming up, but it's been fun. But Emily, I can't help but notice, but you did a little bit of cross-pollination this week, pardon the pun, and you were on the Space Foundation podcast.
Yeah, I was. I taped that episode. I think we taped it sometime in December. And because they approached me about last year, and they were like, we want to do a podcast with, a human spaceflight expert. So I was like, okay, I'll do it. So we did it last month, and it was a lot of fun.
It's a great interview. It's a great interview.
You. Yeah, I got to talk sort of about, past, present, and future of spaceflight, and sort of, my vision of spaceflight. So it was a lot of fun,
nice.
And I love the Space Foundation. I love what they do. So it was a lot of fun. It was a big honor to do that. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, you're also moonlighting. with over at Higher Orbits this week. Sorry, I couldn't resist that.
Yeah, I did a talk for them. About it's not publicly available. It was part of one of their programs for students, but I did a little talk about like space literature, sort of the history of space literature, and I went through sort of a capsule history of, space literature, A through Z, or A through Z, as you all would say over in England. So I kind of did that, and then I talked a little bit about, my own career, and because it was for students, and I talked a little bit about, how I got started, and tried to give some advice, about, how to work in the space industry without being a scientist or an engineer, something like that, because I'm neither of those, and I still have had a career, so... Yeah,
absolutely.
So, yeah, that was a lot of fun. I love Higher Orbits. Y'all, I hope you check them out. They're a lot of fun.
We will stick a link about them for sure. I do hope to get Michelle on at some point to talk about what they do. I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah, me too. She's awesome. Yeah. She is awesome. She's really cool.
So we'll sort that out for some future date. But this episode, I'm super excited about this episode because I've already edited most of it because we recorded most of it last night. And it's really, like, the interview is so good that we have coming up. And it all came about really quite quickly after last week's show when we mentioned the Apollo 11 movie. But I do think it's appropriate right now, just before we move on to the news and then get into the interview, just to point out that we are aware that we are neglecting that it's Space Remembrance Week. It's an exceptionally strange thing that you have the anniversary of the Apollo 1 fire, the Space Shuttle Challenger, and that's the 35th anniversary this year, and the Columbia disaster, all within such a short space of time. And there are a lot of events going on to commemorate these anniversaries over these few weeks. And if you go on the Space Hipsters Facebook page at the moment, there are plenty of wonderful memorials going on there as well. So yeah, we're not covering it this week, but we are offering something really positive and hopefully quite inspirational instead.
Yeah, I agree. I think Space Remembrance Week, there are a few online remembrances. I think the American Space Museum has a link. If you go on their Facebook, they have a link to one of them online, a virtual remembrance ceremony, because a lot of them are in person. If you go to like Cape Canaveral or Titusville, they have a lot of in-person memorials, which are awesome, but obviously we can't do that right now. We have to stay safe, obviously, which is great. So a lot of it's being done online this year, so I highly recommend to check that out. And like Dave said in Space Hipsters, we are running some of our memorials that we've done the last few years as well. So obviously I take Astronaut Remembrance Week seriously, but I think it's kind of a nice, I guess, tribute of sorts to look at a program is inspirational and successful, and that it is inspiring. And to me, it sort of, pardon the pun, carries the fire of, what a lot of the people who left this earth, unfortunately, in the course of trying to get to spaceflight did. So it sort of carries their legacy.
Absolutely. I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting today's interview to be as inspiring as it was. And we'll talk more about this later, but I really do think it is a fitting tribute, although not directly.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I will post within the show notes, as always, I'll post links to things, but I will post a link to some other memorials that are going on for those who might not know that those things are happening. If you'd like to get involved with those things, then we encourage it, of course.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Yeah, let's get on with the show then.
Today, up here where the blue sky turns to black, we can say at long last to Dick, Mike, Judy, to Ron and Elle, and to Krista and Greg. Dear friends, we have resumed the journey that we promised to continue for you. Dear friends, your loss has meant that we could confidently begin anew. Dear friends, your spirit and your dream are still alive in our hearts.
So I want to try and round up the news as quick as we can today, because our interview with Ben, as I said, is amazing, and I don't want to leave too much out of it. So since we last recorded the podcast, there have been 4 launches. China had their first launch of 2021 with their Long March 3BE rocket, putting a communication satellite in orbit. Rocket Labs also put a joint EU and Chinese satellite into orbit with their Electron rocket from New Zealand. This was a mission called Another One Leaves the Crust, as we mentioned last week. Very amusing. And SpaceX had 2 launches from the Space Coast in Florida of their Falcon 9 rocket. The first one was on the 20th of January and put 60 more Starlink satellites into orbit. And it was also the first time that the first stage of that rocket had been used 8 times, which is pretty incredible. And the second one was on the 24th of January, and it delivered a record 143 small satellites into orbit for a variety of countries and companies. So it's certainly getting crowded up there. But again, I will post information in the notes.
This might not seem that big of a news story, but it's been quite sad to see that NASA has started to demolish one of the old mobile launch platforms, MLP-2. It's a huge historical piece which was involved in 51 different Apollo and shuttle missions. With no customers in need of its services anymore, NASA has decided it can't justify how much space it takes up and doesn't see enough value in it as a tourist attraction to keep it.
Yeah, it's pretty sad that those images of it being broken up aren't particularly nice. It's quite an iconic thing, that, and has a place in history for sure.
Yeah, I wonder if anything's, well, maybe be something for another episode. Absolutely. So Joe Biden has decided to share the Oval Office with a large piece of moon rock which was collected on the Apollo 17 mission. There is a lot of talk online about the future of NASA under the new administration, with no mention of the Artemis program in any speeches so far. So this gesture of having the rock in the office is either to put us off the scent or to indicate a seriousness of going back to the moon. Who knows? But Jim Bridenstine has officially left his role as NASA chief, with the job of acting administrator going to the agency's associate administrator, Steve Jerzik, until the role is permanently filled. It is one of 34 acting leader roles which need to be finalized by the new administration. So let's hope that we do see some movement on this soon, that we get someone permanently in place, as we spoke about last week, because although the private enterprise of spaceflight is doing well, in my opinion,
NASA has a huge leading role to be played in global space flight endeavors.
Speaking of global space flight, Dawn Aerospace aims to launch New Zealand's first space plane from a standard airport. The Mark II Aurora space plane has been given approval from the New Zealand Civil Aviation Authority to fly suborbital missions from this airport, but we've not been told which one. Normally, these kinds of planes are launched in very isolated locations to avoid disruptions to normal air traffic, but this could be an interesting development and yet another aerospace company that we need to keep on our radar.
Absolutely. And finally, there will be an EVA, which stands for Extravehicular Activity, which is a fancy term for a spacewalk, on the ISS this week, the International Space Station. Astronauts Michael Hopkins and Victor Glover will spend 6 to 7 hours outside of the station to install the Airbus Bartolomeo platform. This platform has cost about 40 million euros, and the European Space Agency has been keen to point out its usefulness for commercial entities, academic institutes, and other lower budget customers. This is the first of 4 EVAs which will take place over the next 3 weeks, with each of the 4 astronauts which went up to the station on the Crew Dragon capsule in November putting on a spacesuit to perform a number of upgrades on the station. So yeah, plenty going on over the next few weeks, and there's been plenty going on this week. So no doubt a lot of these stories will spill over on as we go forward, and it feels like we should be having a discussion, but I really do want to get onto this onto Ben's interview because it's so good.
Absolutely, let's go.
Cal flight controllers, keep watching your date. I'm still going to be asking for a go-no-go here in about 4 minutes.
Last week, we mentioned that there is a new film out this weekend, which is the follow-up to the 2019 Apollo 11 movie. It is Apollo 11 2, Electric Boogaloo. Just kidding. No, it's not that. This is off script. Dave's going to kill me. Actually, no, it's a short film, 24 minutes to be precise, entitled Apollo 11 Quarantine. And as the title suggests, it looks at what happened in the 21 days after the 3 astronauts returned from their flight on the moon.
It's been made by the same team as the original movie, directed by Todd Miller. And we were fortunate enough to spend an hour last night talking to Ben Feist, one of the technical consultants who worked on both the original movie and this new short film too. He's also the man behind the Apollo in Real Time website, which currently features the full archival material from Apollo missions 11, 13, and 17, which you can go through in real time or just explore from a number of different vantages within mission control or on the spacecraft. It's an incredible resource. He now works at NASA, and he told us that a piece of software he programmed is being used for the first time this week during the EVA we just discussed.
That's really amazing and mind-blowing.
Yeah.
At any rate, this was a really great interview, and we hope that you enjoy listening to Ben as much as we did last night.
Roger, Eagle, contact. Roger, how does it look? The Eagle has wings.
Welcome, Ben Feist. Thanks very much for joining us on this week's episode of Space and Things.
Well, thanks very much for having me.
It really is an honor to have you here, so thanks very much. So please tell us a little bit more about this new movie which you've been consulting on, Apollo 11 Quarantine.
Sure. The Apollo 11 Quarantine movie is a short film that's being released in IMAX theaters, I think, as we speak. It is essentially an epilogue that continues the Apollo 11 film from kind of where it left off, around where it left off. That in the credits of the original film, there is a reference to the Lunar Receiving Lab and the fact that they just got out of quarantine. But this backs up a little bit and talks about or depicts them going through the process of decontamination and all the different activities that happened after they landed back on Earth.
Was that new footage that hadn't been seen before? Did you uncover some stuff, or how's this come about?
Yes, it turned. Well, I'll paraphrase what a lot of what the director has said to many people when on these kinds of interviews. But the material that was scanned for the original Apollo 11 film wasn't just the reels that we wanted to use for the film. When we discovered the 70 millimeter footage in the National Archives, part of the whole process of working with them and having them agree to give us this very precious material and to move it to New York for scanning was that we would scan the whole gamut of what was there in 70 millimeter and donate it all back to the National Archives. So with the material that was in the Apollo 11 film, and I hope a lot of your listeners have seen it, a lot of that consists of that 70 millimeter footage, which is just incredible to see on a big screen. But it was probably less than 5% of the material that we scanned in totality for the whole thing. So in the process of packaging up that material, it is a huge amount. It is 2.2 petabytes of data.
I've never even heard of that amount of data before.
So 2,200 terabytes of data.
Wow.
In its raw form.
That's a lot.
Scanned to, there's going to be a bit of a process to get it into the National Archives. And through that process, Todd expressed that he kind of kept looking at a little bit of it and thinking about, well, maybe there's something here. We can pull this back together. It's just so amazing to look at this material and to work with it. Kind of can't help but thinking about what would it be like to pull together a quarantine film. So it sounds like that's where it started with him. And my involvement in it was really as a technical advisor, which was part of my role on the Apollo 11 feature-length documentary. I also did a lot of the audio restoration for that, but none of that audio is being used in the short film. So I got to I had the great job of getting rough cuts over the past year and giving notes back and just being excited about this film for quite a long time. That's why I was expressing, I've been working on this for a long time. I've been dying for it to get out there. So I'm really excited that it's finally out in the public.
It's very apt as well, especially, right now our country is very much in England. We're all in lockdown. So the idea of a quarantine film coming out right now is very apt. It's almost like you planned this.
Well, I mean, it might be a little on the nose if you think of it that way, but I think there's a great underlying moral to this documentary, and that is that, here's a crew that they did this amazing thing and they got back to Earth, and they didn't just immediately go on tour around the world and take a victory lap. They had to go and do this thing they didn't want to have to do. Nobody would want to have to do it, and kind of do the job that they didn't want to have to do, and did it. And I think that moral of let's all just do what we need to do, and no one's saying it's any fun, but it's an important thing for us to do, and it's all there in the film.
Absolutely.
Are there any moments? This is kind of just about the Apollo 11 footage in totality, because I don't know. And by the way, I did see the film I think 4 or 5 times in IMAX, and I was just obsessed. I was like, I can't believe this even exists, But are there any moments looking back now, you wish, personally you'd kept in the movie that maybe were, edited out and might we see them in a future release, maybe?
Well, as you know, I'm the creator of Apollo in Real Time. So from my perspective, all of the stuff that was edited out shouldn't be, and it should all be there for everybody to see. That's why I'm really excited about this National Archives part of the process, is that this material is going to be there for future filmmakers if they want to use, but also for people that just want to look at what exists of our documentation of what happened. Will all be there. It doesn't have to necessarily be wrapped into a film for you to go to the theater to look at. And that was a little bit of the idea around Apollo in Real Time. It was like unediting a mission and undocumenting it into a just raw material playing back. But, as the technical advisor in the film, I was always pulling on the historical accuracy end of the rope. And Todd was also very interested in historical accuracy, but he also had a role to play in making sure that this was something that people would want to sit and watch in a theater, and ebbs and flows of how that's supposed to work emotionally in a theater is an expectation audiences arrive with that you don't necessarily even think about. So there's a lot of things that I think I would like to see that weren't in the film, but that's only because I know it exists. Once I saw the film sitting as it does and watching audiences react to it, I got to forget all that kind of stuff you bring to it if you're part of the machine that's making it, and just look at it for what it is. And I think it's spectacular. You've watched it 5 times. I've probably watched it 50 times, in the process of making it. But then I also never miss an opportunity to sit and watch in the theater. I can watch it just like another audience member. I mean, it's only historical footage.
Yeah.
It's, we had something to do with piecing it together in a palatable way, but we tried to get out of the way of the original footage the original filmmakers that shot it.
Yeah.
What I really liked about Apollo 11 was it had no narrator, had no talking heads, and it didn't have a host. It really just put the mission and the people front and center. Like, they were the stars of the film. Did you all ever consider using a narrator, and why didn't you use one? I loved it, but I'm sure there are people who are like, I wish there'd been somebody to narrate it. Yeah. I personally love that there wasn't a narrator. It was just the people. And so can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I love that about it too. I think it gives the material itself space to just breathe and live, and you kind of get, let me just say, the first reaction I had with the first rough cut of the Quarantine film was just this emotional reaction of feeling like you were there again. Like, you've been in the film Apollo 11 so many times, watching it in the theater, and it gives you that feeling of what would it have been like to be there, and you're just there. And now we're there again for 24 more minutes. It's so it has the same process, same structure as what you just described, with no narration. There is some sound design. A lot of the footage, or all of the footage, was without sound. So we had to create the sounds that would have been there, but we've been as accurate as we could. But that decision, was, again, the genius of what Todd was trying to achieve with this, and a way of getting out of the way of the footage. If you just let the material play out, it does tell its own story. And the public affairs officer, who's describing in the original feature-length film what's happening during the mission, he's talking to the News Corps, and he's giving the News Corps audience full credit for having been briefed on the mission and knowing what he's probably talking about, and not, dumbing everything down to super general population level. But we've just proven that's, if you give the audience some credit, they will pick it up. The little pencil animations and the PAO commentary was the only guidance that you get. That looks like it has served enough. We didn't receive any feedback, like you just said, with people saying, I wish there was a narrator.
Yeah.
What we did, though, is we got a lot of feedback that said, I didn't realize it was so complicated. Like how many stages had to happen. The idea of a PTC happening, the passive thermal control maneuver, and the docking on the way to the moon. It just, people hadn't thought about it if you're just not a space enthusiast. And it was kind of educational from that perspective too, explaining what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, I've used this movie so many times to explain why I'm so interested in all of this and why that mission means so much to me. I even had my mum and dad sit down on Christmas Day in 2019. I turned up, we had our Christmas dinner, and I was like, and they were like, what do you want to do now? Do you want to play a game? I was like, well, I've got this Blu-ray and I think you might like it. I mean, they were both alive at the time. They were just getting into their teenage years. But I doubt they would have necessarily experienced it like this movie. So I think this movie is a wonderful way of opening the door for people, letting them see what happens, how amazing it is. But it doesn't spoon feed them. It doesn't give them all the information. It doesn't give them all the knowledge. It makes them go, oh, that's really cool. I want to go and find out more. And I think that's where it really, really, really works.
Oh, thank you. I agree that it was intended to have that impact. And this is the idea of making that, Todd used to joke that he wants to make the planetarium film that runs like every 45 minutes forever. This is a relevant thing always, and it's just about something that happened in history. It doesn't date itself over time or anything like that. So hopefully, it is the ultimate for anybody who was interested in this topic of, you didn't know what it would be like to stand there, and now you do. And I'm glad to hear that you forced your parents to watch that, and I'm also glad that it turns out that they like it.
Yeah, well, it didn't take much forcing. It worked. But it is interesting that you bring up the museum thing, because there is the museum cut, the First Steps edition, which I think brings it down to about 47 minutes. Now, I saw that version first, and then I saw the full version, and then I've also been back into museums and seen the First Steps edition. And although I'm aware of what's been cut, and I love that extra footage, it does really work in that museum environment to have that edited cut, and it still really does tell the story and can inspire people, especially kids who don't have the attention span of an hour and a half feature length. This is a good edit.
Well, that's great to hear. That was a late thing in the process of making the film, that we needed a shorter cut. And I think there's even like an 18-minute cut or something I've heard about. Like, for some of the museums want an even shorter cut. So watching it, which I did as a technical advisor again, was just emotionally painful for me. To Emily's point of, is there anything you wish you didn't have to cut out? Well, everything that was cut out to make that shorter cut is the answer, right? But I'm glad to hear I'm unable to look at it with those kinds of dispassionate, uncritical eyes. So I'm glad to hear it works out for you.
I doubt you can reveal spoilers. We know they're in quarantine for the new film. That's kind of a spoiler. What is your personal favorite moment from the IMAX Apollo 11 film?
I think what the restoration that was all done, and the audio work that had to be done, and the research that had to be done was actually hopefully invisible to anybody watching the film. Like, it just looks like it's working. But the moment during countdown where they are suffering a hydrogen leak in the repressurization of the second stage, and they have to send a crew to tighten some bolts around a valve. We actually found the audio where they say what camera they were on, and then we found the footage of that camera. Like, this was a massive amount of work. So you're just watching, and it goes, you hear Cronkite talk about the fact that it's happening. You hear the PAO officer saying what's happening, and then you can hear somebody on console say, if you want to watch it, it's on camera 18. And then we put camera 18 up so that the people are in mission control and the audience watching it. So when the first time I saw it all edited together with camera 18, that's literally all the research, the audio that was restored being used, the finding all the different archive footage and piecing it together in a seamless way. I literally threw both arms up in the air, like in triumph, the first time I saw that scene working. So it might be a strange choice, but that's my favorite moment in the film.
I didn't even know that footage even existed. So seeing anything like that in the movie, it was like, what? This is from my perspective. I was like, I didn't even know this footage was still around. I mean, it's amazing anybody tracked it down and sort of, spliced it together to make it coherent. That's My favorite part was, I'm such a loser. I started weeping when they showed the Hornet at dawn. Oh my God. I started, because I'm former Navy, and I literally just tears, like I was like, I don't know why. That just put me over the edge, because it's like, okay, they're coming home now. They're going to be, it's like, oh my God. Okay. I'm getting weepy just thinking about it. All right, let's move on.
Well, that's good. I'm glad that the Jon Stewart hit the right mark. That song coming in right when it does. And I was sitting next to somebody else who's former military. And when that scene started, I'd seen it before. So I just looked over to see what the reaction was. And he just looked at me. He turned and looked at me, and he just nodded. He was like, yes, you did it right. You did it right.
When that Mother Country song kicks in, that whole sequence is just
breathtaking.
Incredible.
Yeah, and that's a difficult chord to strike properly. That could be, rah, 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 America, like super rah, 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 America, which rightly so, right? It's the Apollo 11, peak of everything working well, right? But it is the right, and the lyrics of the song are actually very not rah, 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 America.
No, they're not. Yeah.
But it's, this was a recording that was on board. They were listening to, and we actually even found Jon Stewart's widow to talk to her about this whole thing. And she didn't know, and he didn't know, that his song was even on board during Apollo 11. So this is all like a really excellent connecting of everything together to make that happen.
Wow.
Hey, world, hold on to your hat. I'm going to turn you upside down.
Well, I, for one, am very excited about the new film, and I can't wait to watch it.
Yeah, this is funny. It's like we're discussing a film and you haven't seen it yet. But,
no.
So I can say anything about it. You don't know if I'm telling the truth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Ben, I want to take you back, because you've got a tech background, and
that's right.
Then Apollo 17 real time was your breakthrough into it, my understanding. You correct me if I'm wrong. Was your breakthrough into the space world. clearly you must have been into it like we are beforehand, otherwise you would never have done that. Has this always been a massive thing, or did you just happen to find Apollo 17 stuff, or be like, I want to know more about Apollo 17, I'm going to use my tech stuff and acknowledge and make something? And then at what point did you go, oh my God, what have I got myself into? And now you work for NASA. So tell us a little bit more about how you go from doing Apollo in real time to working for NASA, because that just seems incredible.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. It's a little bit of the second thing that you said, in that I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. I mean, I was a space enthusiast, but I wasn't going to, Space Fest. I wasn't collecting autographs. I wasn't, there's a level of space enthusiast that I wasn't. Like a Star Trek fan who really likes the show but has never gone to a convention, right? Yeah. I think the Apollo 13 movie probably really cemented it for me when that came out. Before that, I knew it was cool, but I'm a shuttle generation person. But I think the Apollo 13 film really made me realize how great it is. And then From the Earth to the Moon after that.
Yes.
Then when in about 1999 or so, I came across the Apollo Lunar Surface Journal on dial-up internet, which I'm sure you've seen. It's still there.
I still use it.
Yeah, is this original piece of the internet, constantly updated, but the technology on it is blue, white background, Times New Roman font, blue underline if it's a hyperlink. But it contains all of the transcripts of what people said when they were on the surface of the moon, which, I'm an internet person in that I build things on the internet, and I've been thinking about how to build things on the internet since about 1996. When I had a dial-up modem deliver me the words that they said to each other in detail on the moon, it was like one of those moments of the information age working. And I just kind of went, this is the richest content I didn't even imagine that this would be available. And then I immediately thought, wow, this would make a really wicked multimedia application, like a CD-ROM or something, which was what you did back then, because, it was dial-up world. And I kind of had that idea in the back of my head for all those years. And I had a million excuses to myself as to why I'm not starting to try to tackle that. I mean, I knew it was really huge. The technologies weren't really there yet. And I'd go, oh, that sounds hard. And then not thinking about it again. Like, this would pop into my head every 6 months or so. This is not like I was obsessing over it for all this time. And then in about 2009, I actually did start. Maybe I could at least contribute some of my efforts to complete the Apollo 17 record, which was not completed on the Apollo Flight Journal. And I thought maybe I could use my computer science background to work with this material and come up with an automated way to fix this bad missing data for Apollo 17. And then I was too far in to stop when I realized there was no automated way to do that. It was a manual effort. It was going to take me 6 years. But it was such, like to your point, such rich material and so interesting that, if you work on a hobby like that for too long, you can go a bit cross-eyed and just go, forget it. I'm getting overwhelmed. I'll never finish. But it's a hobby. It's not a job. You don't have a deadline. So every time I'd feel like that, I just wouldn't work on it for a little while. And then, it would creep back in like, what was that last thing that was bugging me that I couldn't figure out? And I'm interested in it again and working on it. And no one knew what I was doing, which was really liberating.
This is crazy. So it was literally just a hobby, and you go on and you launch the Apollo 17 in real time website, and then eventually you go on to do 11 and 13. So how did that come about? How did it pick up momentum to get to that point?
Working on the 17 thing, I put that out in 2015. Todd Miller called me and said, I'm making a short film about 17, and I came across your amazing website. Oh my God. Can you direct me to where I can find the archival material? And then I introduced him to Steven Slater, who's the archive producer for the films now. So that was amazing. It was like, wow, somebody actually reached out to me that's interested in this stuff. And, he'd call me and go, I'm really sorry to bug you again. And I like, are you kidding me? This is my favorite topic. I'll talk to you for as long as you want. And in 2015, I put it out. My only thing I could think of to do with it is to try to submit it for some online awards, which it did not win. It was like, I don't know, what do you do after you put something on the internet?
Yeah.
And it was just kind of over and fizzling. Like, frankly, it was like, okay. And then I thought I should probably come up with something to do for the 2016 anniversary of Apollo 17. And right around the time I was thinking about that, Noah Petro, who's the chief project scientist of the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter at Goddard Space Flight Center, emailed me out of the blue. And it was like the first email I got with an @nasa.gov at the end of the email. He was like, hey, really great website. I think it's fantastic. And, I just noticed you might have a mistake in the transcript here. You say it's Gene talking when it's really Jack. And I was like, it's full of those kinds of mistakes, by the way. So I was like, thank you very much. I'll fix it right away. And by the way, you're from NASA. That's amazing. I haven't heard from anybody. And we struck up a friendship. We started jumping on phone calls and getting to know each other until eventually I said to him, hey, I'm thinking of what to do for next anniversary. You're the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. Like, are there any photographs or anything of where they landed? Like, I hadn't even looked online. I just asked Noah. He started laughing and said, like, that's literally my job. And he gave me huge amounts of data, like 3D models of the surface and like high resolution data where you can see the footprints on the surface. And I was like, oh my God, now I have to do something with this because, NASA gave it to me. I can't just sit on it now. I have to do something. Over that summer, I decided to render out where the rover was driving. So on all the different stations and rover traverses, as they're called, they turned off the television cameras because the antenna would be bouncing around when they were driving and there'd be no image on Earth anyway. So save the battery, let the transmitter cool, turn it off. So when they're driving on the surface, you just get like 30 minutes of them chattering and like, hey, watch out for that hole in the ground. And, Jack's taking pictures from his camera the whole time while Gene's driving. So I figured I'll make like a little dotted line, follow the crew along the surface of exactly where they drove. So I found all the historical material of where they think they were, and then like matched it up with the transcripts that I had restored, which turned out to be great source data for figuring out where they were at what time. And I made all these renderings, which took hundreds of hours of computer rendering time, turned them into videos. So now there's no blank video on the website. And this was going to be my release for the 2016 version. And I, emailed Noah and said, hey, I did something with all that data you gave me. Check it out. And he immediately phoned me, was like, oh my God, you need to come down to NASA and show everybody this. Like, and I went, what? What? Really? Like, aren't there people already at NASA doing this stuff? And he was like, well, we have people that do this kind of work, but you've literally taken Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter data and you've reconstructed an Apollo mission using it. Like, we never anticipated that would be a use of LRO. So, come down and give a talk on the anniversary. So I went down December of 2016 during the anniversary and stood in front of a room full of scientists at Goddard Space Flight Center and told them about all the work I had done for 6 years. And at the end of it, literally, they invited me to start working with them. They invited me to come on a field analog in the Petrillo Desert where they were going to be doing similar EVAs, because this might be a great way to organize the data that we are gathering on those field analogs. I could not even listen to what the person was saying to me that was asking me to do this, because I thought, I must be mishearing this. This is too good to be true. Like, not too good to be true, more like too good for me to be hearing this correctly. Like, how am I going to get time off work? And I'm a fraud. Like, I'm just like a multimedia guy. I'm not some NASA computer scientist, right? Like, they've got the wrong guy. Maybe they think I'm holding it ransom, like it's copyrighted idea, and they need to involve me. Like, I had all these reasons that they didn't just want to involve me, right? And I probably I talked them out of inviting me like 3 times, tried to, and they kept going, no, we don't want the computer software. We don't want the idea. We want you to come and help us. Like, you're an expert in this now. And so once I got it through my thick skull, I said yes. And from there, the story continues.
Yeah, now you have the email address of nasa.gov.
That's right, I do.
which must have been a real buzz when you got sent that.
Yeah, my mom got the first email from me for sure.
Oh, amazing! Yeah. That's a beautiful thing. That is a beautiful thing. And obviously since then we've done 11, which I guess was associated with the movie as you got that data, and then last year you launched 13, which was wonderful for me because it was, lockdown had just happened. I wasn't going anywhere. The 50th anniversary of Apollo 13, and I literally devoured so much content. I hardly slept. It was just wonderful. So I know it's taken a less amount of time each time. Obviously, you've had a few more people help you for 13. Are you planning on doing the remaining missions, or are you passing that mantle on to someone else now?
No, there's definitely plans to do it, but you can't plan in the traditional sense these things. They're so big, and they require, like, if you were to pay everybody to do it, it would cost millions of dollars in hours, right?
Yeah.
So what it winds up being is a bit of an archival search where you're figuring out what is the source material that we have to work with. And we got really lucky on 13, which is like a funny phrase, but in that the audio for 13 had been digitized already by the National Science Foundation for the mission control audio. And it was in bad shape. It needed to be restored in the same way that I had restored the Apollo 11 audio. But also the air-to-ground audio was recorded with time code next to it. And it's the only mission that had time code recorded next to it. All of the others were not recorded on the same tape format. So I've been looking everywhere, like, please tell me the remaining missions also have this. And it's like, nope. So that just meant I could just run this through the algorithm that the team has made for the Apollo in real-time restoration process. And that's why Apollo 13 only took 8 months to make. So the plan, and I've actually applied for a NASA grant, is to do 16. And I refresh the page every day to see if that grant has been accepted. And there's no word yet. But if that happens, then it means it can be an official part of what I'm doing at NASA. It can be one of the projects I'm funded on. And in addition to the future mission work that I'm doing, I can do Apollo in real time as part of my paying gig at NASA, if you think of it that way. So fingers crossed. And if the funding doesn't come through, we'll do it the old-fashioned way. It's just going to take a really long time.
Yeah, well, my fingers are definitely crossed. I mean, I don't want to blow smoke up. No, actually, I do want to blow smoke up your bum. Because this is an incredible resource. It's an incredible thing that you have done and that you have started here. And this is something that's, this is a piece of research which is going to outlive us all. It's going to be here forever, and people are going to come back and look at these transcripts and these files, and for these missions, which are some of the most important things that have ever happened to humanity. So, and as a consumer of this kind of stuff as well, I just love it. I can go on the website and I can choose which person in mission control I want to be that day, and listen to part of the mission from their perspective. It's just an incredible resource.
Yeah. And nobody's listened to it all. Nobody's heard it all.
Yeah. Because
I certainly haven't.
Yeah.
Apollo 11 is 11,000 hours long, and Apollo 13 is 7,500 hours long.
Ridiculous.
It's a lot of material.
On Apollo 13, I don't know if you remember this, but I remember there's this phone call at one point, and it happened right after the contingency. And it's between Vance Brand and Joe Kerwin, because Brand was the one of the Capcoms, but I think he was just sort of hanging out in the mocher. He wasn't Capcom when the explosion happened, and then he's calling Kerwin, who's like the oncoming Capcom, and I was like, "Holy crap! This exists?" Because I'm figuring, well, they had to have called each other and been like, "Yo, you're about to walk into something really nuts." You may want to come in early, or you may want to just know about this before you come in here. Because that would make sense to me. Something nuts is going on at my job. I hope somebody would call me up and say, hey, something blew up and you may want to come in here.
Yeah, I sent that. Actually, Joe Kerwin is still alive. And I sent that recording to him saying, I think I found something that you've probably never heard since it happened. And he replied and said, I remember that phone call. He remembers that moment. And they're both so pro on that call too. There's no superlatives going on. He was like, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You could tell he sounded kind of not scared, but holy crap. But at the same time, you could tell they were just keeping it together. I remember Brand was like, this is a nightmare sim. And I was like, oh my God. So it was amazing to hear that stuff, because it's like, I didn't know that stuff I didn't know it was preserved, but you figured there probably were a lot of moments like this where people were calling, hey, just so you're not walking into an atomic disaster, here's what's going on, So I just thought that was kind of a neat little moment.
The phone calls seem to be when the personalities come out, because they're personal calls usually. And, calling home, I'm not going to be home tonight kind of call to the significant other. And like, oh, yeah, I've been watching on TV. I saw that, like, don't worry about it. I'll, do what you need to do kind of conversation. And, even though everybody's being really human in those moments, they were still like really solid people that were not, like, there were no tempers flashing. It was really amazing to see. Like, this could have been, if you think about it, here we are unveiling 7,500 hours of Apollo 13 audio that no one's ever heard. Maybe it will make a liar out of our entire thing about the right stuff. It turns out everybody was panicking the whole time or something, and we just didn't know that. But thankfully, not the case at all. Like, everybody was as cool and calm as we've come to expect.
Yeah, I stayed up late to listen to the moment when the explosion happened during the 50th anniversary last year was on the website. And I couldn't believe how calm everyone was in those hours afterwards. It was incredible.
The shift that was on was at the end of their shift when the explosion happened, and they're all tired. They're in a this can't be right kind of mode. Like, they're reacting and reacting and reacting. But by the time the next shift came on, which was Glenn Lundy's shift, this happened. Yeah. And by all accounts, he showed up and was faster and like more pointed and driving everybody. He was like quicker than everybody else in the room. And it's like one of those moments where you watch somebody at the peak of human achievement, and listening to Glenn Lundy on that shift is the most inspiring thing.
Absolutely.
Listening to Glenn do that work is my special thing that is, I think everybody should listen to.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to mention as well that there's an attempt to try to track some of these gems, like these little moments that happen, like phone calls to spouses and things like that. There's a forum that's a companion to the Apollo in Real Time website that if you go there, you'll see, I think it's only probably 30 or 40 different. Actually, for 13, it might be more like 100 different little interesting moments with some commentary about it. Like hearing somebody getting in trouble, hearing somebody then later apologizing, like it's that kind of thing. That's kind of an important part of unwinding what these recordings can teach you about how things worked, beyond them just being really amazing portals into history. Yeah, so if you come across something, there's a good chance you're the first person to have ever heard that. So save the link and throw it in the forum so other, it doesn't matter if it's a duplicate of another, just talk about it. Because otherwise, it'll just be a needle in a haystack for someone else to find later.
That really is great and so important. Now, we won't keep you for too much longer, but we have a Patreon page, and our top tier Patreons get to ask questions of our guest. And this time, great. Round 2 of them sent us a question. David Cuniff asks, of all the preparations that NASA made prior to the launch of Apollo 11, what is the biggest lesson learned from the mission that was subsequently applied to later missions?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it had to do with definitely all the systems that were being used after landing and on EVA. They had a lot of contingency. They had mobility questions. Basically, can you stick to a timeline when you're on the surface of the moon? That was a great big giant black question mark. Like, if you think about 11, it was about a survival mission. Like, it was kind of, can you get on the surface and off safely? We've done everything up to that. We've never done the surface part. So any moment they were on the surface, everybody was just staring at all the charts, and like, some pressure valve went too high on the lunar module, and they'd be running back inside and leaving pronto.
Yeah,
I think another one that really comes to mind is they had some uncertainty in the orbit, on lunar orbit, before descent and landing, which caused a huge error in the landing ellipse. So they, not only because they were being sent into a very rocky area, and then Neil had to famously take over and fly horizontally before landing, but they were already way off. They were already way early, passing all their landmarks many seconds early, and they knew they were going to be landing very long. And all the post-mission debriefing and everything, they figured out there was still some air left in the airlock when they separated from the command module, and it gave them a little extra few feet per second boost that lasted like over the course of 2 orbits before they started descent and landing. That put them in a very different place at the start time of descent and landing, which then made all their landmarks come by early. So those kinds of things, they then proved on 12 they could do a pinpoint landing. These are just the popular things that the versions of what I know. The list of things that it went into making 12 better is probably like as long as all the list of things they did on 12. Like every successive mission was learning from the last through this process.
Yeah. We've also heard from Amar, and I like this question a lot, and I'm very interested just to know your point of view here. After you've reviewed all the footage and audio and all that you've experienced in your time or collection or restoration, if you could be a fly on the wall and have experienced just one mission, which one would it have been and why?
Well, I mean, 17 is my favorite mission, I have to admit. Clearly, for me, it's my entry into this whole thing, and it was really only because it was missing on the flight journal that I took an interest in it. But it's the crown jewel of the whole Apollo program. They had a scientist on board in the form of Harrison Jack Schmidt, who conducted field geology on the surface of the moon for 3 days. Like, imagine you're a PhD field geologist, like hard rock field geology, and then you're standing on the moon like 12 years later doing field geology. Just imagine what that must have been like for Jack. If I would love to, and I've really gotten to, like, it sounds a funny phrase to use, but I've really gotten to know that crew well. Like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of listening to them, getting to know their sense of humor, and being able to hear like when one's irritated, just because I know what he sounds like when he's irritated, which I know for sure I could not have heard when I first listened to that audio. You kind of get that for all of the different missions if you listen through them all. And that's a nice personal gift that you get. It's like not just being a fly on the wall, but a fly that's part of the crew that like knows them really well. So I'd have to say 17, but that's an unfair question to begin with. They're all amazing.
Thank you for giving us your time tonight. I think this has been very inspirational, seeing you going from having a hobby to working for NASA. And I imagine a few of our listeners are going to be taking up a new hobby of looking up archives. Well,
yes, I'm very hesitant to say, follow your dreams and good things will happen or anything like that. I always reflect back that this was really about unwinding after work and not about some ulterior motive that was going to get me noticed in some way. I feel very thankful that did happen, but I think the bigger thing is just don't forget to spend time working on things for yourself and not only for your employer.
Absolutely. A friend of mine says if you do something for the right reasons, good things happen. And
absolutely.
I definitely feel like what you were doing was for the right reasons. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
This is Gene, and I'm on the surface. And as I take man's last step from the surface, we leave as we came, and God willing, as we shall return. With peace and in hope for all mankind.
So, how amazing was that? What a lovely, lovely, lovely guy.
Yeah, that was incredible. That was one of the most fun interviews I've ever had. That and plus, I'm kind of starstruck, obviously, because I'm just a big fan of his work. I remember when Apollo 11 in real time, the old school one, came out in 2009, and I'll be honest, that was a real big factor in me getting back into like space flight, because around that summer I really started. During the Apollo 40th, I really started, getting back into reading my Apollo books again. And plus, with the addition of the Twitter from that, it was like falling in love with, well, I wouldn't say falling in love. It was like rediscovering something you'd fallen in love with. So it was really incredible.
Absolutely. Those Twitter accounts that were set up for the 40th, that were just amazing, and seeing the mission control react with the spacecraft. So it was a very clever thing they did there, and And Ben's work since then has been incredible, and all the stuff he did for the Apollo 17 in real time. I mean, that was just a hobby. And look what he's done with that. It's incredible. So he mentioned within the interview that there was a short film that the Apollo 11 team, the team that made the Apollo 11 film, started on. And this was Apollo 17, Last Steps. Now, I'd not heard of this, and that annoyed me because I thought I'd done a lot of research about Apollo 17 and what was online. I generally had never heard of this thing. And I found the link on Vimeo afterwards, after the interview, and I sent it to you, Emily. How incredible is that short film? It's
a beautiful film. The only thing I didn't like about it was I wanted more.
Yeah.
I'll be real. I wanted like 10 times more than that. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing, you know? Because, I mean, it was just, oh wow. I'd never seen a lot of that stuff, you know, or I'd never seen it that cleaned up. So I was just like, yeah, the only criticism I have of it was it wasn't long enough. Not enough.
Give us more.
Give us more. We want like a 2-hour version of that, you know?
Absolutely. I said to you last night when we were watching it, I want them to do every mission.
Yeah.
Because the same way I want Ben to do every mission of the archives, these shorts or proper movies, if we can get them, of all of this stuff would be incredible because they just make it come alive.
You know, for somebody like me who really was not alive, totally was not alive during that time. I mean, I just watching that, it was like, you know, I didn't experience this, but you feel like you were still there in some way because it's so cleaned up. The only thing that's a little kind of like out of place is the fashions and stuff, you know, especially from the Apollo 17 one, but things are getting a little 70s in there, but they were little loud shirts and then that one, but and some mutton chops. But other than that, I mean, you feel like you're completely like, okay, this could fit in now. You feel like you are blessed enough to be there, which is incredible.
Yeah. So that really was a great interview, and thank you, Ben, for giving us your time. In terms of the distribution of the new film, it's going to be available this weekend. It's getting a limited IMAX release. So if you have an IMAX theater near you, check the listings. Although obviously take care with what you're doing outside and all those kind of things. But hopefully your local IMAX will have taken precautions anyway, so you can watch that safely. Annoyingly, we don't yet know when and how it's going to end up online or for purchase for those of you who can't get to IMAX. But once we know that, we will let people know.
All right.
And of course, we will put links to Ben's social media and websites within the show notes. But if you haven't seen the Apollo 11 movie or you haven't visited Apollo in Real Time website, you really are missing out. And we did, of course, talk for much longer than you've heard in this episode. I chopped a fair bit out just for time reasons. And we discussed the soundtrack of the movie and Ben's role in restoring the Apollo mission control room. I had to take all of that out. And that's fascinating. That was really amazing.
Yeah,
but fear not. You can watch the full interview over on our Patreon page. If you're one of our lovely subscribers over there, I really do recommend you head over there to patreon.com/space and things to find out more. Of course, you can join in there as well.
Yeah, not trying to be pushy, but of course, we'd love it if you just listen to us, you know. But if you go to Patreon this year, you guys are gonna get you guys really are in for a treat. We've got some pretty incredible interviews lined up for the coming months, and you can find out in advance who they are. Give us some questions to ask and watch the full unedited interviews just by signing up. So please do check that out. We do highly recommend it, and it's not just, you know, lip service. There's some good stuff coming up.
Yeah, it's my email. I can't believe the people I've been emailing this week. It's been mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Absolutely mind-blowing.
I'm seeing some of the, I don't want to sound braggy, but, you know, we got some pretty good names coming up that, and we're going to have some pretty awesome interviews. So, y'all are in for a treat, and we got a good year coming up, so it's going to be pretty cool.
And of course, we couldn't have done that without without you people listening in the first place. So thank you very much for that. This is all we have time for this week, and we hope that you've enjoyed this podcast and our interview with Ben. And thanks to everyone who has. I know we sound like a broken record here, but really do thank you for your support of the show, and to those who hit that share button. It really is important.
Yes, thank you so much to all of you for listening, but please remember, in space, no one can hear you beam.
Space and Things has been brought to you by And Things Productions.